Chapter 1. The Defiant Captive. Lyra didn't know that the man who'd captured her was the most powerful Alpha King in the realm. She didn't know that her defiant spirit only made him more determined to claim her, and she certainly didn't know that her vow to never love him would become the very challenge that sealed her fate. Cold stone pressed against her cheek as consciousness returned in cruel waves. Lyra's wrists burned where iron manacles bit into her skin, the metal warm from her struggles. The chamber around her was nothing like the dungeon she'd expected. Silk hangings draped the walls in deep emerald and gold, catching firelight from the massive hearth that should have warmed her, but somehow only made the chill in her bones feel sharper. Where was she? The last thing she remembered was the raiders descending on her village like shadows given form. Men with eyes that glowed amber in the darkness, moving with inhuman speed through the streets where children played just hours before. She'd been hauling water from the well when the screams started. The bucket had fallen from nerveless fingers as she watched her neighbours fall, their life force draining away like spilled wine. Then strong arms had seized her from behind. A voice like winter thunder had spoken words she couldn't understand, and darkness had claimed her. Now she was here, wherever here was, chained like a prized possession in a room that cost more than her entire village's annual harvest. The heavy oak door swung open without warning, and Lyra's breath caught in her throat. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in midnight black that made his pale skin seem to glow in the firelight. Dark hair fell across his forehead in waves that suggested he'd run his fingers through it more than once. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. Amber. The same impossible amber she'd seen in the raiders' faces, but deeper, more ancient. They held her gaze with an intensity that made something deep in her chest flutter like a caged bird. Beautiful, devastatingly, impossibly beautiful, and absolutely terrifying. "You're awake." His voice was the same winter thunder from her nightmares, but softer now, almost gentle. He moved with predatory grace across the room, each step measured and deliberate. "Where am I?" Lyra's voice cracked from disuse, but she forced her chin up, meeting those impossible eyes with every ounce of defiance she possessed. "Where is my village?" "Safe." He stopped just out of her reach, hands clasped behind his back. "Your people live, though they needed healing. The sickness that plagued them has been addressed." Sickness. Lyra's heart clenched. For months her neighbours had been wasting away, children growing weaker by the day, while the elders whispered of curses and dark magic. Nothing the healers tried had worked. "You're lying." "I don't lie." Something flickered in those amber depths. "Your village was dying, little wolf, poisoned from within by magic that would have claimed every soul within the moon's turn." Little wolf. The endearment sent an unwelcome warmth through her chest, and she hated herself for it. "My name is Lyra." The words came out sharper than intended. "And I'm not yours to call anything." His lips curved in what might have been a smile. Lyra. Her name on his tongue sounded like a prayer, like something precious. "Do you know what you are?" "I'm nothing." The response was automatic, beaten into her by years of scraping by in a village that barely tolerated orphans. "I'm no one important." "No." He stepped closer, and that strange warmth in her chest flared hotter. "You're everything." The words hit her like a physical blow. Lyra jerked against her chains, fury rising to drown out the inexplicable pull she felt toward this stranger. "You're insane! I'm the village foundling. I haul water and tend goats and sleep in a shed behind the baker's house. I'm not anything." "You're my mate." Silence stretched between them like a bowstring pulled taut. Lyra stared at him, certain she'd misheard, certain her mind had finally snapped under the strain of captivity. "No!" The word tore from her throat, ragged and desperate. "No, I don't know what game you're playing, but I won't be part of it. I'll never—" He moved faster than her eyes could track, suddenly crouched before her, those burning amber eyes level with hers. This close, she could see flecks of gold swimming in their depths, could smell cedar and winter air and something wild that made her pulse race. "I'll never love you." The words spilled out like a dam bursting. Every ounce of fear and fury and desperate defiance she possessed packed into them. "I don't care who you are or what you think you want with me. I'll never love you." For a heartbeat, he went perfectly still. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were warm against her cheek, and despite every instinct screaming at her to pull away, Lyra found herself frozen, caught in the gravity of his presence. "We'll see," he murmured, voice soft as velvet and twice as dangerous. He leaned closer until his breath ghosted across her ear. "We'll see about that, little wolf." Something golden and warm unfurled in her chest, wrapping around her ribs like a living thing. It pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, stronger when he touched her, aching when he pulled away. Mate bond. The term whispered through her mind from half-remembered stories. Impossible. Humans couldn't have mate bonds. He rose to his full height, towering over her small form. "Rest now. Tomorrow we begin." Begin what? But she was talking to empty air. He'd vanished as silently as he'd come, leaving only the scent of cedar and the maddening warmth still pulsing behind her sternum. Lyra pressed her back against the cold stone wall, trying to escape the lingering heat of his presence. Her wrists still burned from the manacles, but it was nothing compared to the fire now living beneath her skin. She could feel it there, that golden thread connecting her to him, no matter how far away he went. "I'll never love you," she whispered to the empty room, but the words felt hollow now, a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. Outside her window, wolves howled in the distance, their voices rising and falling like a song of homecoming. And despite herself, despite everything, Lyra found her own heart trying to join their chorus. The Alpha King had claimed her as his mate. Now came the real battle, against him, against the bond, against the treacherous part of her heart that had already begun to wonder what it might feel like to stop running and simply stay. The golden thread pulsed again, warm and insistent, and Lyra closed her eyes against the tears that threatened to fall. She'd survived 22 years in a world that had no place for her. She could survive this too, even if it killed her. Chapter 2. The Patient Predator. Dawn came with the sound of chains being unlocked. Lyra jerked awake from dreams filled with amber eyes and winter thunder voices. The manacles around her wrists had vanished sometime in the night, leaving only faint red marks on her skin. In their place, a silk dress lay draped across the foot of the bed, deep sapphire blue with silver threading that caught the morning light like captured starlight. She kicked it to the floor. "I see you've found my gift." His voice came from the doorway, warm with what might have been amusement. The Alpha King leaned against the frame with predatory ease, arms crossed over his broad chest. Today he wore leather instead of silk, dark pants and a white shirt that made his amber eyes seem to glow. "It's not a gift if it comes with strings attached." Lyra wrapped her arms around her knees, hating how small she felt in the massive bed. Pretty cages are still cages. "The door is unlocked." Her heart stuttered. "What?" "The door, little wolf. It's been unlocked since I left last night." He pushed off from the doorframe and moved into the room with that same liquid grace. "You're free to explore the castle, the grounds, even the forest beyond if you wish." Lyra stared at him, searching for the trap. There was always a trap. Why? Because mates aren't prisoners. Something flickered across his features, too quick to interpret. "Though I would prefer you wear something other than a torn shift when you do." "The dress, of course." Lyra glanced at the sapphire silk pooled on the stone floor, then back at his face. "What's the catch?" "No catch." His voice carried that same gentle patience that made her want to scream. "Though I should mention that breakfast is served in the main hall. You must be hungry." As if summoned by his words, her stomach chose that moment to growl loud enough to wake the dead. Heat flooded her cheeks, and she pressed a hand to her treacherous belly. The Alpha King's lips twitched. "I'll have something sent up instead." "Don't." The word came out sharper than intended. "I mean, I can come down." His smile was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "I'll wait for you in the hall." He was gone before she could protest, leaving her alone with the dress and her own stubborn pride. Lyra stared at the sapphire silk for a long moment, then snatched it from the floor with more force than necessary. It fit perfectly, of course. The fabric whispered against her skin like water, the bodice hugging her curves without being indecent. She felt like a fraud wearing something so fine, like a child playing dress-up in her better's clothes. The door was indeed unlocked. Lyra stood in the hallway for several heartbeats, freedom stretching before her like an open road. She could run, should run, find the nearest window, climb down the castle walls, and disappear into the forest before he even realized she was gone. Instead, her feet carried her toward the sound of voices echoing from below. The main hall was larger than her entire village square, with soaring ceilings and banners hanging from the rafters in deep crimson and gold. A massive table dominated the centre of the room, but it was the man seated at its head that drew her attention like a moth to flame. He'd been watching for her. Lyra could tell by the way his amber eyes found hers the instant she appeared, by the satisfied curve of his mouth that said he'd known exactly what choice she would make. Lyra. Her name was a welcome and a victory all wrapped in velvet. Come. Every instinct she'd developed over 22 years of survival screamed at her to run. Instead, she found herself walking toward him, drawn by forces she didn't understand and couldn't fight. The chair he indicated was directly to his right, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, could catch hints of that cedar and winter scent that made her pulse race. "I'm not hungry," she lied, even as her stomach betrayed her with another mortifying growl. The Alpha King said nothing, simply began filling the plate in front of her with fresh bread, honey, sliced fruit that must have cost a fortune this far from any orchard. His movements were precise, economical, and Lyra found herself watching the way his hands moved with fascination. Strong hands, gentle hands, hands that could probably snap her neck without effort, but touched her yesterday like she was made of spun glass. "Eat." The command was soft but unmistakable. "I told you I wasn't. You haven't eaten in 3 days." His voice carried an edge now, something dark and protective that made the golden thread in her chest pulse. "You will eat, or I will feed you myself." The threat shouldn't have sent heat spiraling through her belly, shouldn't have made her wonder what those strong hands would feel like against her skin. But it did, and the knowledge terrified her. Lyra picked up a piece of bread with hands that trembled only slightly. The first bite was heaven, soft and warm, and everything her hollow stomach craved. She tried to eat slowly, with dignity, but hunger won out over pride. He watched her the entire time, not in the way men usually watched her, with calculation and hunger and cruel intent. This was different, protective, possessive in a way that should have set her teeth on edge, but somehow didn't. Better. Satisfaction coloured his tone when she'd cleared half the plate. "Now, little wolf, shall we discuss your accommodations?" "What about them?" "You destroyed a priceless Ming vase last night." Lyra's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "I did no such thing." "The window, then." His amber eyes glinted with what might have been amusement. "Did you truly think you could climb down a sheer castle wall in the dark?" Heat flooded her cheeks again. "How did you—" "No." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with that unsettling intensity. "Your scent, for one. You left blood on the windowsill when you cut yourself on the glass." Without warning, he reached for her hand. Lyra jerked backward, but he was faster, catching her wrist in a grip that was firm but impossibly gentle. His thumb traced the thin line of healing skin across her palm. Fire shot up her arm at the contact, spreading through her chest like wildfire. The golden thread pulsed, stronger now, wrapping around her ribs until she could barely breathe. "You could have been killed." His voice had gone rough, dangerous in a way that made her shiver. 100-foot drop onto stone, in the dark, wearing nothing but a shift. It would have been worth it. The words hung between them like a blade. The Alpha King went very still, his grip on her wrist tightening just enough to remind her of his strength. Would it? The question was silk over steel. Death rather than a few days in my company? Yes. It was a lie, and they both knew it. Lyra could feel the bond between them humming with life, could see the way his pupils dilated when she was close, could taste the want and need, and something deeper that rolled off him in waves. But she couldn't let him know that, couldn't let him see how his patience was slowly dismantling every wall she'd built around her heart. "I see." He released her hand so suddenly she almost fell forward. "In that case, perhaps you prefer different accommodations." Before she could ask what he meant, he was on his feet, moving toward the great doors with that predatory grace. Lyra scrambled to follow, the sapphire dress whispering around her legs. He led her through corridors lined with tapestries and artwork worth more than most kingdoms, past servants who bowed low when they saw him and shot curious glances at her. The tour ended at a door she recognized, her original prison. "No." The word tore from her throat before she could stop it. I said you were free to explore." His smile was sharp now, all teeth and no warmth. "But freedom, little wolf, must be earned. Perhaps a night back in chains will remind you of the alternative." Panic clawed at her chest. The thought of being chained again, helpless, trapped in that beautiful prison while the bond between them grew stronger. "Wait." He paused, hand on the door handle. "Yes?" The words stuck in her throat like glass. "I'll stay, in the other room. I won't try to escape again." "Your word?" "My word." For a moment he studied her face with those impossible amber eyes. Then slowly he released the door handle. "Very well." His voice was gentle again, that patient tone that made her want to scream. "Though I think we both know you'll try again before the week is out." He was probably right. The knowledge settled in her stomach like a stone, cold and heavy and inescapable. "Why are you doing this?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "What do you want from me?" The Alpha King turned to face her fully, and for a moment something raw and vulnerable flickered across his features, something that looked almost like longing. "Everything," he said simply. "I want everything you are, everything you could be. I want your trust, your heart, your stubborn, beautiful spirit." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "And I'll wait however long it takes for you to give it freely." The golden thread pulsed again, warm and insistent, and Lyra pressed a hand to her chest as if she could hold it back through sheer force of will. "I won't love you," she whispered. "We'll see," he said again, and this time his smile held a promise that made her knees weak. "We'll see about that, little wolf." Then he was gone, leaving her alone in the corridor with nothing but silk against her skin, and fire in her veins, and the terrible, wonderful knowledge that she might already be lost. Chapter 3. Cracks in the armour. The screams started just after midnight. Lyra jolted awake in her silk-draped bed, heart hammering against her ribs. The sound echoed through the castle walls like something torn from the depths of hell itself. Raw, agonized, utterly broken, human screams. She was on her feet before conscious thought caught up, bare feet hitting cold stone as she followed the sound through corridors lit only by moonlight streaming through tall windows. The screaming grew louder as she climbed the stairs, more desperate, until it cut off so suddenly the silence felt like a physical blow. The door to the Alpha King's chambers stood slightly ajar. Lyra hesitated for a heartbeat, every instinct warning her to turn back, to pretend she'd never heard anything. But something golden and insistent pulsed in her chest, the mate bond pulling her forward like an invisible chain. She pushed the door open. He was magnificent even in sleep, sprawled across a bed large enough for 3 men, dark hair falling across his forehead in waves. But it was the tears on his face that stopped her breath, silver tracks catching moonlight as they slipped down his cheeks, his powerful body trembling like a child's. "No!" he whispered, voice broken and raw. "Please, not her! Take me instead, please!" The words hit Lyra like a physical blow. She'd never heard him sound anything but controlled, patient, dangerously gentle. This was different. This was a man being torn apart from the inside. "Don't leave me," he breathed, and the agony in his voice made something crack in her chest. "Elena, please don't leave me." Elena. Another woman's name on his lips, spoken with such desperate love that Lyra felt like an intruder, witnessing something too private for mortal eyes. He thrashed suddenly, a sound torn from his throat that wasn't quite human. Whatever nightmare held him wasn't letting go easily. Before she could think better of it, Lyra crossed to the bed and reached out, placing her hand gently on his shoulder. "Wake up." His eyes snapped open instantly, amber burning like flame in the darkness. For a moment he looked at her without recognition, trapped between dream and waking. Then awareness flooded back, and he jerked upright so fast she stumbled backward. "Lyra!" Her name was a rasp of sound. "What are you doing here?" "You were screaming." The words came out smaller than she'd intended. I thought someone was being killed." Something flickered across his features. Shame, maybe, or grief so deep it had worn grooves in his soul. "Go back to your room." The command was quiet but unmistakable. Lyra should have obeyed, should have turned and walked away and pretended this never happened. Instead, she found herself sitting on the edge of his massive bed, drawn by forces she didn't understand. "Who is Elena?" He went perfectly still, every muscle in his body coiling like a spring. "Don't." "Your first mate?" The guess slipped out before she could stop it. "The one who died?" "Get out." His voice was deadly quiet now, amber eyes burning with something that might have been rage or grief or both. "Get out, Lyra, now." "No." The words surprised them both. Lyra stared at him, at this powerful man who could kill her with his bare hands, who held the lives of thousands in his palm, and felt something shift inside her chest. He was broken. For all his strength, all his patient control and gentle commands, he was as shattered as she was. The knowledge settled over her like a blanket, warm and terrible and somehow comforting. "Tell me." She shifted closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Tell me what happened to her." "You don't want to know." "Yes, I do." For a long moment he stared at her, amber eyes searching her face for something she couldn't name. Then slowly the fight went out of him. She was perfect. His voice was soft now, distant, lost in memories that obviously still had the power to destroy him. "Beautiful, gentle, everything a queen should be. We were bonded for 3 years before." He stopped, jaw clenching. Lyra waited, patient as he'd been with her. Before the Shadow Court decided she was a weakness they could exploit. The words came out flat, emotionless, but she could see the storm raging behind his eyes. "They took her while I was away settling a border dispute. When I returned—" His hands clenched into fists, and Lyra caught the scent of blood. His claws had extended without him realizing it, cutting into his palms. I found her in our bed, still warm, still—" He swallowed hard. "The bond broke when she died. I felt her terror, her pain, her final moments, all of it." The raw agony in his voice made Lyra's chest tight. Without thinking, she reached out and covered his bloodied hand with hers. The contact sent fire racing up her arm, but she didn't pull away. "How long ago?" she asked quietly. 5 years. He stared down at their joined hands, and something shifted in his expression. 5 years of emptiness, of existing but not living, until— Until? His gaze lifted to meet hers, and the intensity there made her breath catch. "Until 3 days ago, when I walked into a dying village and saw a woman hauling water from a well, a woman who looked at me like I was the enemy, who fought my men with nothing but a wooden bucket and more courage than most warriors possess." The golden thread between them pulsed, warm and insistent. Lyra felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back furiously. "I'm not her replacement," she said, voice steadier than she felt. "I won't be your consolation prize." "You're not." His free hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "You're not Elena, you're nothing like her, and thank the gods for that." "I don't understand." "Elena was gentle, soft. She never raised her voice, never challenged me, never made me work for anything." His amber eyes held hers captive. "You, little wolf, are fire and storm and stubborn defiance. You make me earn every smile, every civil word. You're not my consolation prize, you're my salvation." The words hung between them like a bridge she wasn't sure she was ready to cross. Lyra stared at him, at this man who'd lost everything and somehow found the strength to hope again, and felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crack. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't be what you need." "Why?" The simple question broke something inside her. "Because everyone leaves, everyone always leaves, and I can't. I can't survive losing someone again." Her parents had abandoned her as a baby, leaving her on the steps of the village temple with nothing but a note that said they couldn't afford another mouth to feed. The baker who'd taken her in had died when she was 12, leaving her truly alone. Even the village that barely tolerated her had been dying slowly, one person at a time. She'd learned early that loving people meant losing them. Better to keep her distance, to expect nothing, to protect the fragile pieces of her heart that remained. "I would never leave you," he said quietly, and the conviction in his voice made her chest ache. "Death itself couldn't take me from you, not again." "You can't promise that." "I can." His thumb traced across her lips, and she felt herself leaning into the touch, despite every screaming instinct to pull away. "The bond between us isn't like what I had with Elena. It's stronger, deeper. It would take more than death to sever it." "How do you know?" "Because I can feel it." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Right here." He pressed her hand to his chest, over his heart. "Every beat, every breath, you're in my soul, Lyra. You have been from the moment I first saw you." The golden thread pulsed again, and this time she didn't try to fight it. She could feel him there, warm and solid and undeniably real. Could feel his heartbeat matching hers, his breath catching when she leaned closer. "I'm scared," she admitted, the words barely audible. "I know." He shifted closer until she could feel his breath against her forehead. "I'm terrified too, but we don't have to be afraid alone." She was drowning in amber, in the scent of cedar and winter air, in the impossible gentleness of his touch. Her lips parted, and she saw his pupils dilate in response. "Lyra." Her name was a prayer on his lips. "Yes?" But instead of answering, he leaned forward, closing the distance between them until his forehead rested against hers. This close, she could count his eyelashes, could see the faint scar along his jaw, could feel the restraint it was costing him not to close that final inch between their mouths. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, and she could hear the desperation in his voice. Tell me to let you go, and I will. She should. Every survival instinct she possessed screamed at her to pull away, to rebuild her walls before he could tear them down completely. Instead, she found herself tilting her face up, lips brushing his as she spoke. "I can't." The words were her surrender, and they both knew it. His mouth claimed hers with a gentleness that destroyed her. Not the rough-taking she'd expected, but something soft and reverent and achingly sweet. He kissed her like she was precious, like she was everything he'd ever wanted, wrapped up in silk and stubbornness. Lyra melted against him, her hands fisting in the fabric of his shirt, as 5 years of loneliness and 22 years of emptiness collided with the devastating reality of being wanted. Truly, completely wanted. The mate bond sang between them, golden and warm and perfect, and for a moment she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work. Then reality crashed back in. She jerked away so suddenly she nearly fell off the bed, pressing the back of her hand to her lips as if she could erase the taste of him. "No," the word came out broken. "No, I can't do this." He didn't try to stop her as she fled, but she could feel his eyes on her back, could hear the ragged sound of his breathing. The mate bond stretched between them like a golden chain, growing more painful with each step she took away from him. She made it to her room before the tears started, sliding down her back against the door as sobs tore from her throat. The taste of him lingered on her lips, cedar and winter, and something uniquely him that made her want to turn around and run back to his arms. Instead, she pressed her face into her knees and cried for everything she'd lost, everything she wanted, and everything she was too broken to claim. Outside her window, wolves howled in the distance, their voices rising in a song that sounded almost like mourning. And in her chest, the golden thread pulsed with patient, relentless love. Chapter 4. The Seduction Gambit. 3 days passed in careful avoidance. Lyra took her meals in her room, explored the castle's furthest reaches, and threw herself into any task that kept her hands busy and her mind off Amber Eyes and the taste of cedar on her lips. The servants whispered when they thought she couldn't hear, speculation about the Alpha King's mate who fled from his presence like he carried plague. If only they knew how much effort it took to stay away. The mate bond stretched between them like a living thing, growing stronger despite the distance. She could feel him in the castle, sense his presence like warmth from a banked fire. Twice she'd caught herself walking toward his chambers before reason reasserted itself. This couldn't continue. On the 4th morning, Lyra stood before her mirror and made a decision that would have terrified her a week ago. If she couldn't run from him, if the bond made escape impossible, then she would have to try a different approach. She would seduce him, make him vulnerable, and when his guard was down, when he was lost in the illusion of her surrender, she would find a way to break the bond between them. It was a dangerous game, but she was running out of options. The emerald dress had appeared on her bed sometime during the night, as if he'd known she would need it. Silk the colour of deep forest shadow, with a neckline that hinted at curves without being indecent. It clung to her body like water, transforming the village foundling into something that might belong in a king's court. Almost. She braided her hair loosely, letting strands escape to frame her face in deliberate disarray. No jewellery, no perfume. She would rely on what nature had given her and pray it was enough. The main hall was empty except for him. He sat at the head of the great table, Amber Eyes fixed on papers spread before him. State business, probably. The weight of kingdoms on his broad shoulders. He looked up when she entered, and she saw his breath catch at the sight of her. Lyra. Her name was surprise and hunger, and something deeper wrapped in velvet. "You look different?" She moved toward him with deliberate grace, letting her hips sway just enough to catch his attention. "I thought it was time I made an effort." His nostrils flared slightly, and she knew he could scent the lie on her. But he said nothing, simply watched her approach with the intensity of a predator tracking prey. "Join me," he said, indicating the chair to his right. The same one she'd occupied 3 days ago, before everything changed. Lyra settled into the seat with studied elegance, letting her fingers brush his as she reached for her wine glass. The contact sent fire racing up her arm, but this time she didn't pull away. "You've been avoiding me," he observed, voice carefully neutral. "I've been thinking." She took a sip of wine, watching him over the rim. "About what you said. About us." Something flickered in his amber eyes. Hope, maybe. Or suspicion. And I realized I've been unfair. The lie slipped from her tongue, sweet as honey. "You've been nothing but patient with me, and I've repaid that kindness with stubbornness and ingratitude." "Lyra, let me finish." She turned in her chair to face him fully, one hand coming to rest on his forearm. His muscles tensed under her touch, but he didn't pull away. "You saved my village, my people. You could have taken what you wanted by force, but you didn't. You've treated me with more respect than I've ever known." The words tasted like ash in her mouth, but she forced herself to continue. "I want to try," she said quietly, "to see if this could work between us." For a moment he said nothing, simply stared at her with those impossible eyes, then slowly his hand covered hers. "What changed your mind?" The question was soft, but she heard the trap hidden beneath. He was testing her, looking for cracks in her performance. "You did." She let vulnerability creep into her voice, the same raw honesty that had coloured their conversation 3 nights ago. "The way you spoke about Elena, the way you looked when you told me about losing her. I realised you're not the monster I wanted you to be." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, and she had to fight not to shiver at the contact. "I'm not sure I'm much better than a monster, little wolf. Then prove me wrong." The challenge hung between them like a gauntlet thrown. Lyra held her breath, waiting to see if he would take the bait. "Would you walk with me?" he asked finally. "There's something I'd like to show you." She nodded, rising with fluid grace. He offered his arm, and she took it, letting herself lean into his warmth as he led her from the hall. The castle gardens were a marvel of controlled wilderness, with flowering vines climbing stone walls and paths that wound between beds of roses and jasmine. Moonlight turned everything silver and shadow, creating an intimacy that made her pulse quicken despite her intentions. "It's beautiful," she said, and for once she wasn't lying. "Elena designed them." His voice was soft, distant. "She said a castle should have something alive growing in it, something that could bloom even in stone and shadow." The mention of his first mate should have stung. Instead, Lyra found herself studying his profile in the moonlight, noting the way grief still lived in the lines around his eyes. "Do you still love her?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, too honest for the game she was supposed to be playing. "Part of me always will." He stopped walking, turning to face her beneath an arbour heavy with night-blooming roses. "But love isn't finite, Lyra. The heart doesn't diminish because it's been used before." "How can you be sure?" "Because I feel it." His free hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing the line of her cheek with devastating gentleness. "This pull between us, this need to be near you, to protect you, to make you smile. It's not the same as what I felt for Elena. It's deeper, stronger." The golden thread between them pulsed, warm and insistent, and Lyra felt her careful walls beginning to crack. "I'm scared," she whispered, and realised with horror that it wasn't part of the act. "Of what?" "Of this." She gestured between them, encompassing the bond and the heat and the way her heart hammered whenever he was near. "Of wanting something I can't have. You can have it." His voice was fierce now, amber eyes burning in the darkness. "You can have all of it. Me, my protection, my devotion. Everything I am is yours if you'll take it." The words hit her like a physical blow. For a moment the game fell away completely, leaving only the truth of what he was offering. Not just his body or his power, but his heart, his soul, everything. It would be so easy to say yes, to let herself fall into his arms and surrender to the bond pulling at her chest, to stop running and fighting and simply belong. What if I can't love you the way you need? The question tore from her throat, raw and desperate. What if I'm too broken, too damaged? What if I disappoint you? Impossible. The word was a growl of conviction. You could never disappoint me, little wolf. Never. His mouth was inches from hers now, breath warm against her lips. The scent of cedar and winter air surrounded her, intoxicating as wine. I don't know how to do this, she breathed. I don't know how to trust, how to love. Everyone who's ever cared for me has left. Then I'll teach you. His forehead touched hers, and she felt tears prick at her eyes. We'll learn together. The kiss, when it came, was nothing like the gentle claiming in his chambers. This was fire and desperation, and years of loneliness finally finding harbour. Lyra melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt as he kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning. The mate bond sang between them, golden and perfect and right in a way that terrified her. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to stay in control, supposed to keep her distance even as she played the part of willing mate. Instead, she was drowning in sensation, in the taste of him and the warmth of his hands, and the way he held her like she was precious beyond measure. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his amber eyes were molten gold in the moonlight. "Stay with me tonight," he whispered against her lips. "Not for the bond, not because you have to, because you want to." The words hung between them like a bridge she wasn't sure she was ready to cross. Every instinct screamed at her to pull away, to remember the game she was supposed to be playing. But when she looked into his eyes, when she felt the steady beat of his heart against her chest, the game felt suddenly hollow, meaningless. "I want to," she admitted, the words torn from some deep, honest place she'd tried to bury. "God help me, I want to." His smile was radiant, transforming his face from merely handsome to devastating. "Then stay." She should have said no, should have pulled away and retreated to the safety of her walls. Instead, she found herself nodding, sealing her fate with a single word: yes. He swept her into his arms then, carrying her back through moonlit corridors to his chambers with a care that made her chest tight. When he set her down beside his massive bed, his hands were gentle, reverent. "Are you certain?" he asked, amber eyes searching her face. "We can wait. I meant what I said about patience." Lyra stared at him, at this powerful man who could take whatever he wanted, but chose instead to wait for her permission, who kissed her like she was everything and then gave her the choice to walk away. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She wasn't seducing him. He was seducing her, had been from the very beginning, with his patience and his gentleness and his unwavering certainty that she was worth waiting for. And it was working. "I'm certain," she whispered, reaching up to frame his face in her hands. "I'm terrified, but I'm certain." His kiss was her reward and her ruin. And as he lowered her to his bed with hands that trembled with restraint, Lyra realized that somewhere between hatred and fear she'd begun to fall. The game was over, and she'd lost completely. Chapter 5. The Breaking Point. Dawn came too soon, and not soon enough. Lyra woke in the Alpha King's arms, her cheek pressed against his chest, where she could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. His scent surrounded her, cedar and winter air, and something uniquely him that made her want to burrow deeper into his warmth and never surface. Instead, she carefully extracted herself from his embrace and slipped from the bed. The emerald dress lay in ruins on the floor, testament to the passion that had consumed them both through the long hours of night. Lyra pulled on his discarded shirt instead, the soft fabric falling to her thighs as she moved to the window. The castle courtyard bustled with activity below. Servants hurrying about their morning duties, guards changing shifts, and in the centre of it all a group of richly dressed men dismounting from travel-weary horses. Diplomats by the look of them, come for the summit he'd mentioned weeks ago. Second thoughts? His voice was rough with sleep, warm with satisfaction. Lyra turned to find him propped on one elbow, amber eyes dark with memory of what they'd shared. Her body responded instantly to the sight of him, heat pooling low in her belly at the way his gaze traced her form in his shirt. "The delegates have arrived," she said, instead of answering his question. "I know." He rose from the bed with fluid grace, magnificently naked and utterly unself-conscious. "The summit begins today." "What kind of summit?" "The boring kind." His arms came around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "Territory disputes, trade agreements, marriage alliances." The last words made something twist in her stomach. "Marriage alliances?" "Nothing that concerns you." His lips found the sensitive spot behind her ear, making her shiver. "You're mine now, little wolf. No alliance could change that." Mine. The possessive word should have set her teeth on edge. Instead, it sent warmth spiralling through her chest, the mate bond humming with contentment. A sharp knock at the door interrupted the moment. "Your Majesty," came a voice from the corridor. "Lord Vance and his delegation request an immediate audience." The Alpha King's body went rigid against hers. "Tell them I'll be down within the hour." "He's most insistent, sire. Says it's a matter of urgent concern regarding the Northern Territories." Lyra felt, rather than saw, the Alpha King's jaw clench. "Very well, I'll be there shortly." Footsteps retreated down the corridor. In the sudden silence, Lyra became acutely aware of how still he'd gone. "You have to go," she said quietly. "I don't want to leave you." His arms tightened around her. "Not yet." "I'll be here when you get back." The words slipped out before she could stop them, carrying more weight than she'd intended. A promise freely given. He turned her in his arms, amber eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Will you?" The simple question held layers of meaning. Will you be here? Will you stay? Will you choose this? Choose us? Choose me? "Yes," she whispered and meant it. His kiss was fierce and claiming, a brand that marked her as surely as any ceremony. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. "I love you," he said quietly. "I know it's too soon. I know you're not ready to hear it, but I needed you to know." The words hit her like a physical blow. Lyra stared at him, this powerful man who'd just laid his heart at her feet, and felt her own crack open in response. She started, then stopped, the words tangling in her throat. "I know." His thumb traced her cheek with devastating gentleness. "I'll wait. However long it takes, I'll wait." Then he was gone, gathering clothes with efficient movements and disappearing into his private chambers to prepare for the day's politics. Lyra remained by the window, his shirt wrapped around her like armour, watching the delegates below and trying to understand what had happened to her careful walls. She was falling for him, had already fallen, if she was being honest. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. An hour later, she made her way to her own chambers to dress properly. The castle felt different now, less like a prison and more like something she didn't dare name. Servants smiled when they saw her, bowing with a respect that spoke of her changed status, the Alpha King's mate. She was choosing a dress when the screaming started, not like his nightmares. This was sharp, immediate, full of pain and terror. Lyra's blood went cold as she recognized the sound. Battle. She ran barefoot through the corridors, following the sounds of conflict to the great hall. The massive doors stood open, revealing chaos within. Bodies on the floor, blood on the walls, and in the centre of it all, The Alpha King, surrounded by black-clad figures with silver blades that gleamed like captured moonlight. He fought like something wild, inhuman, but even his strength had limits. There were too many of them. Assassins. Lord Vance stood to one side, watching the carnage with cold satisfaction. "Kill him," he ordered, "but make it slow. I want him to know what it feels like to lose everything." Rage flooded through Lyra, hot and all-consuming. These bastards had used the summit as cover, had come here under the pretense of diplomacy to murder the man she loved. The truth hit her like lightning, brilliant and terrifying and absolutely certain. She loved him, loved his patience and his gentleness and his unwavering faith that she was worth waiting for. Loved the way he'd kissed her last night like she was everything, the way he'd held her after like she was precious. And she would be damned if she let these animals take him from her. One of the assassins had worked behind the Alpha King's guard, silver blade raised for a killing stroke to his unprotected back. Without thought, without hesitation, Lyra threw herself forward. The blade meant for his heart took her in the side instead. Pain exploded through her body like liquid fire. She fell to her knees, hand pressed to the wound, as blood seeped between her fingers. But it didn't matter. She'd stopped the killing blow. She'd protected him. "No!" The Alpha King's roar shook the very foundations of the castle. His power exploded outward, raw and primal and devastating. The assassins closest to him simply disintegrated, turned to ash by the force of his rage. The others fled, screaming, leaving only Lord Vance frozen in terror. But Lyra barely noticed. The world was growing dim around the edges, her strength ebbing with each heartbeat. She could feel her life bleeding out onto the cold stone floor. Strong arms gathered her up, and she found herself cradled against a familiar chest. The Alpha King's face swam above her, amber eyes bright with tears and terror. "Stay with me," he commanded, voice breaking. "You don't get to leave me, not now, not like this." "Had to," she gasped, each word a struggle. "They were going to... You were..." "Stupid, brave, impossible woman." His hand pressed over her wound, trying to stem the bleeding. "Why did you do that?" The answer rose to her lips, simple and true and devastating in its honesty. "Because I love you." The words hung between them like a bridge finally built. The Alpha King's breath caught, and for a moment hope flared in his eyes. "Then fight," he demanded. "Fight for us. Fight for what we could have." Lyra tried, but she could feel the darkness closing in. The wound was too deep, the blood loss too severe. In the distance, she could hear him shouting orders, demanding healers, but it was too late. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I waited so long to tell you." "No." His voice was fierce, desperate. "You're not dying. I won't let you. The bond. We can use the bond. I can give you my strength." "How?" But even as she asked, she could feel it. The golden thread between them pulsing with new urgency, reaching out across the growing darkness. "Accept it," he said urgently. "Accept the bond completely. Let me save you." "I don't know how." "Yes, you do." His hands framed her face, amber eyes boring into hers with desperate intensity. "Stop fighting it. Stop running. Choose me. Choose us. Choose to stay." The bond hummed between them, warm and alive and perfect. All she had to do was let go, stop fighting the pull that had terrified her from the beginning, and simply surrender. "I choose you," she breathed, putting everything she had into the words. "I choose love. I choose to stay." The bond snapped into place with the force of lightning. Golden light exploded between them, warm and healing and absolutely right. Lyra gasped as power flowed through her, mending torn flesh and restoring spilled blood. The wound in her side closed as if it had never been, leaving only unmarked skin beneath her bloody clothes. But more than that, she could feel him. Not just his presence, but his very essence. His love, his relief, his absolute devotion flowing through their connection like wine. He was hers now, completely and irrevocably, just as she was his. "Mine," He growled against her lips, kissing her with desperate relief. Yours, she agreed, and felt the last of her walls crumble into dust. Always yours. Around them, the great hall fell silent as the surviving court members witnessed their bonding. The golden light faded, but the connection remained, warm and perfect and eternal. Lord Vance lay dead in the corner, his neck snapped by a casual gesture from the Alpha King. The threat was ended, the bond was complete, and Lyra had finally found her way home. Chapter 6. Crown and Forever. Lyra woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognise, and the most profound sense of belonging she'd ever known. The Alpha King's arms were wrapped around her waist, his chest warm against her back, as they lay tangled together in sheets of finest silk. But it was the bond humming between them that made her breath catch. She could feel everything. His contentment, his love, the way her presence soothed some deep wound in his soul that had been bleeding for 5 years. "Good morning, my queen." His voice was rough with sleep, lips brushing the sensitive spot behind her ear. My queen. The words should have terrified her. Instead, they settled into her chest like coming home. "Is that what I am now?" she asked, turning in his arms to face him. In the morning light, his amber eyes were molten gold, warm with satisfaction and something deeper. "You've been my queen since the moment I first saw you." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing the line of her cheek with devastating gentleness. "The ceremony will simply make it official." "Ceremony?" His smile was radiant. "Did you think I would let you escape without proper vows? The pack needs to witness our bonding, needs to know that their alpha has found his mate at last." The pack. Lyra had almost forgotten that he ruled over more than just the castle and its human servants. Somewhere in the forests beyond these walls, wolves ran free under his protection. Will they accept me? The question slipped out before she could stop it, carrying all her old insecurities. "I'm not nobility. I'm not even pure blood wolf. I'm just everything." He silenced her with a kiss that stole her breath and her doubts in equal measure. "You're everything, Lyra, and anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made the bond pulse with warmth. 3 weeks ago, such possessiveness would have set her teeth on edge. Now it felt like safety, like being precious enough to defend. "What happened to Lord Vance?" she asked, though part of her didn't want to know. "Dead." His voice went flat, cold. "Along with the rest of his conspirators. The Northern Territories are under new management." "You killed them all?" "I would have killed 1,000 more if it meant keeping you safe." His amber eyes held no remorse, no doubt. "I will always choose you, Lyra, over politics, over alliances, over everything. Remember that." The words should have alarmed her. Instead, they sent heat spiralling through her chest, the bond singing with satisfaction at his declaration. A soft knock at the door interrupted the moment. "Your Majesty," came a feminine voice, "the seamstresses are here for the final fitting." "Send them away," the Alpha King growled, arms tightening around Lyra. "We're not ready." "Actually," Lyra said, surprising herself, "I'd like to see the dress." He raised an eyebrow. "Eager to become my wife, little wolf?" The word wife sent warmth flooding through her. Wife, mate, queen, all the things she'd never dared to dream she could be. "Maybe I am," she admitted, then laughed at the way his eyes flared with heat. The seamstresses were waiting in the adjoining chamber, along with what appeared to be half the female staff of the castle. They curtsied when Lyra entered, but their smiles were genuine, warm with the affection of women who'd watched their king suffer alone for too long. The dress they revealed took her breath away. It was ivory silk that seemed to glow from within, cut in clean lines that would skim her body without binding. The bodice was embroidered with silver thread that caught the light like captured starlight, and the sleeves were sheer silk that would flutter like wings when she moved. "It's beautiful," Lyra breathed, touching the fabric with reverent fingers. "It was Queen Elena's," said the head seamstress, an elderly woman with kind eyes. "His Majesty asked us to alter it for you. Said she would have wanted it worn again, would have wanted to see love bloom in these halls once more." Lyra's throat tightened. To wear his first queen's dress should have felt wrong, like stepping into a dead woman's shadow. Instead, it felt like acceptance, like Eleanor herself was blessing this union. "I'm honoured," she said quietly, and meant it. The fitting took the better part of the morning, with adjustments and pinning and excited chatter from the women who seemed genuinely thrilled to be preparing for a royal wedding. Lyra found herself laughing at their stories, joining in their speculation about the evening's festivities, feeling more at ease than she had since arriving at the castle. This was what belonging felt like, not just to him, but to all of this: the castle, the people, the life she was choosing to build. The ceremony was held at sunset in the castle's great courtyard. Lyra had expected a small, intimate affair, but it seemed the entire kingdom had come to witness their alpha claim his mate. Hundreds of people filled the space, from the highest nobles to the humblest servants, all gathered to see their king wed the woman who'd captured his heart. She stood at the edge of the courtyard in Elena's dress, watching as the Alpha King took his place beneath an archway of white roses. He was magnificent in midnight blue velvet, dark hair gleaming in the firelight, amber eyes fixed on her with such intensity she felt it like a physical touch. "Ready, my lady?" asked Marcus, the elderly steward who'd offered to escort her when she admitted she had no family to give her away. Lyra nodded, not trusting her voice. As they began the slow walk down the petal-strewn aisle, she was aware of every eye on her, every whispered blessing and murmur of approval. But it was his gaze that held her, warm with love and pride and absolute certainty. When Marcus placed her hand in the Alpha King's, she felt the bond pulse with joy. "Dearly beloved," began the priest, his voice carrying across the silent courtyard, "we gather tonight to witness the bonding of our Alpha King to his chosen mate, to celebrate the joining of two souls destined for one another." The words washed over her like a benediction. Destined. For so long she'd fought against the pull between them, terrified of what it might mean. Now she understood. Destiny wasn't a cage. It was a gift. "Do you, Lyra, take this man as your mate, your king, your heart's other half? Do you swear to stand beside him in joy and sorrow, in strength and weakness, for all the days of your life?" "I do." The words came out clear and strong, carrying across the courtyard like a bell. "And do you, Kieran, Alpha King of the Northern Realms, take this woman as your mate, your queen, your heart's other half? Do you swear to protect her, cherish her, and honour the bond between you for all the days of your life?" Kieran. She'd never known his name until now, had always thought of him as simply the Alpha King. But hearing it spoken aloud felt like learning a secret, like being granted access to the man beneath the crown. "I do," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Before all witnesses, before the gods themselves, I claim Lyra as my mate, my wife, my queen. She is mine as I am hers, now and always." The priest smiled. "Then by the power vested in me by gods and men, I pronounce you bonded for life. You may kiss your queen, your majesty." Kieran's hands framed her face as he leaned down to claim her lips. The kiss was soft, reverent, a seal on promises made and love freely given. Around them, the crowd erupted in cheers, but Lyra barely heard them. All her attention was focused on the man holding her, on the bond singing between them like pure joy. "My wife," he murmured against her lips. "My queen, my everything." "My king," she whispered back. "My heart, my home." The celebration that followed was a blur of music and laughter and toasts to their happiness. Lyra found herself swept into conversations with nobles and servants alike, all eager to welcome their new queen. She met pack members who'd travelled from distant territories to witness the bonding, saw the relief and joy in their eyes as they looked upon their alpha's happiness. But it was the quiet moments she treasured most. Kieran's hand finding hers across the table during dinner, the way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching, the soft kisses he pressed to her temple as they moved through the crowd. This was love. Not just the desperate passion of the past weeks, but something deeper. Partnership, belonging, home. Late that night, after the last guest had departed and the servants had cleared away the remnants of celebration, Lyra found herself in their chambers now, brushing out her hair before the mirror. Kieran appeared behind her, still magnificent in his wedding finery, amber eyes warm with satisfaction as they met hers in the glass. "Regrets?" he asked, voice carefully neutral. "None." The answer came without hesitation. "You?" "Only that it took us so long to get here." His hands settled on her shoulders, warm and possessive. "I love you, Lyra, my stubborn, brave, impossible queen." "I love you too," she said, and marvelled at how easy the words had become. "My patient, gentle, devastating king." His reflection smiled, and she saw the last shadows finally leave his amber eyes. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now?" He leaned down to press a kiss to the curve of her neck. "Now we have forever to find out." Outside their windows, wolves howled in celebration, their voices rising to the stars in songs of joy and homecoming. And in the castle that had once felt like a prison, Queen Lyra settled into her king's arms and finally understood what it meant to belong. The war was over, love had won, and she would never run again.